You see, some pain does not come from enemies or strangers. It comes from the very house you marry into. This is a story of silent tears, cruel words, and a woman who chose kindness when revenge was easier, and how love melted an ice-cold heart. Let me tell you a story. Precious Williams entered her marriage with a heart full of hope. She believed love could soften anything: tradition, pride, even difficult people. When she married Daniel Williams, she thought she had married into a peaceful and loving family. What she didn't know was that she had walked into a quiet war. Margaret Williams, Daniel's mother, never liked Precious from the beginning. She smiled during the wedding, danced with visitors, and accepted congratulations. But her eyes never warmed when they rested on her new daughter-in-law. To Margaret, Precious was not a wife, she was a threat. From the very first morning Precious moved into the family mansion, the tone was set. "Wake up," Margaret snapped before sunrise. A married woman does not sleep like a spoiled child. Precious hurried out of bed, confused and nervous. She had barely learned the rhythm of the house when chores were already piled on her head. Cooking, cleaning, washing, nothing she did was ever enough. "This soup is too salty. You sweep like someone raised in the streets. Daniel married you, but don't forget this is my house." Daniel noticed the tension, but he said nothing. Like many sons raised under strict mothers, he believed silence was respect. Precious noticed too, and it hurt her more than the insults. At night, she cried quietly into her pillow so Daniel wouldn't hear. Weeks turned to months, and Margaret's cruelty only grew. She criticized Precious in front of neighbors, calling her lazy and useless. "Some women know how to keep a home, others only know how to open their legs and enter marriages." Those words cut deeper than knives. The most painful accusation came when Precious had not yet conceived. "It's been 6 months, Margaret said one evening, folding her arms. "Are you barren?" Precious felt her chest tighten. She tried to explain, to speak, but no words came out. She simply shook her head and went back to the kitchen, tears dropping into the pot she was stirring. That night, Daniel tried to comfort her weakly. "My mother doesn't mean it. Just endure her. She will change." But Precious knew something was wrong. A woman who enjoys another woman's tears does not plan to stop. Still, she stayed. She stayed because she loved her husband. She stayed because she believed kindness could still win. She didn't know yet that the worst pain was still ahead. By the 7th month of her marriage, Precious Williams had learned an important truth. There was no rest for her in that house. Even silence felt heavy, like the walls themselves were watching her suffer. Margaret Williams had made it her duty to remind Precious daily that she did not belong. If Precious woke up early, Margaret complained she was making too much noise. If she woke up late, Margaret accused her of laziness. If the food was good, Margaret claimed it was luck. If it wasn't perfect, she called Precious a disgrace. Daniel could have married better, a woman with sense, a woman with value, Margaret often said within Precious's hearing. Precious swallowed every insult. She had grown up believing that marriage required patience, especially from a woman. So she endured. She cooked, she cleaned, she smiled when neighbors came around, even when her heart felt like it was breaking apart. But the worst pain was not Margaret's words, it was Daniel's silence. Whenever Precious tried to talk to her husband, his responses were always the same. "She's my mother. She's old-fashioned. Please don't disrespect her." One night, Precious gathered courage and spoke through tears. "Daniel, she hates me. I feel like a stranger in my own marriage." Daniel sighed, tired. "Just try harder. Make her happy." Those words crushed Precious more than any insult Margaret had ever spoken. How much harder could she try? Was her pain invisible? Things became worse when Margaret started lying. She told Daniel that Precious answered her rudely. She said Precious refused to help her. She accused Precious of wasting money and being disrespectful. Daniel began to look at his wife differently. Less trust, more suspicion. One afternoon, Precious overheard a conversation that shattered her heart completely. "I know a good girl for you," Margaret said to Daniel confidently. "She's from a respectable home, not like this one you brought." Precious stood behind the door, her hands shaking, her chest burning. She pressed her palm to her mouth to stop herself from crying out loud. So, this was it. Her marriage meant nothing. That night, Precious packed a small bag. She sat on the bed staring at it for hours. Leaving felt like failure. Staying felt like slow death. In her pain, she went to the only person who ever showed her kindness, Mrs. Helen, the elderly neighbor. After listening quietly, Helen held Precious's hands. Bitterness is loud, but kindness is powerful. Don't let her turn you into something you are not. Precious nodded, though she didn't understand how kindness could survive such cruelty. Back in the house, Margaret watched her closely, waiting for her to break. She believed suffering would chase Precious away. But what she didn't know was that every tear Precious cried was shaping her into something stronger, something Margaret could never control. And while Margaret plotted, life quietly prepared a lesson she never expected. Margaret Williams had always believed she was untouchable. For years, she ruled her home with sharp words and cold authority. People feared her tongue, and even Daniel, her only son, rarely challenged her. But life has a way of humbling even the strongest hearts. It began quietly. Margaret started complaining of constant headaches. At first, she dismissed them, brushing them off as stress. Then came the sleepless nights, the dizziness, and the sudden weakness in her legs. Still, she refused to slow down. "I am not weak," she snapped whenever Precious offered help. "Don't pretend to care." Precious nodded and stepped back, though concern weighed heavily on her heart. Despite everything Margaret had done, Precious could not ignore another human being in pain. She watched silently as the woman who once shouted commands now struggled to climb the stairs. One afternoon, Margaret collapsed in the living room. The sound of her fall sent Precious running. She found her mother-in-law on the floor, breathing heavily, her face pale. For a moment, Precious froze. All the insults, the cruelty, the humiliation flashed through her mind. She could have walked away. No one would blame her. But she didn't. She knelt beside Margaret and called for Daniel. That day marked the beginning of a painful shift in the house. Margaret was taken to the hospital, where doctors confirmed she would need long-term care. The woman who once controlled everything now depended on others for the simplest tasks. Relatives visited at first, offering sympathy and advice, but soon their visits reduced. Life moved on, as it always does. Precious stayed. She prepared Margaret's meals carefully, fed her medicine on time, and sat beside her during long, restless nights. She cleaned her body when Margaret was too weak to do so herself, never once showing disgust or anger. Margaret watched her in disbelief. Why didn't she leave? Why wasn't she celebrating? One evening, as Precious adjusted her pillow, Margaret spoke in a weak voice. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "After everything I did to you." Precious paused. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained soft. "Because hatred already lives in this world. I don't want to add to it." Those words haunted Margaret. For the first time, she saw the weight of her actions clearly. The woman she tried to destroy was now the one keeping her alive. Daniel noticed it too. Shame crept into his heart as he watched his wife show more strength than he ever had. He realized too late that his silence had been cruelty. As Margaret's body weakened, her pride began to crack. At night, she lay awake replaying every insult, every lie, every tear she had caused. And for the first time in her life, regret hurt more than sickness. Weeks passed, and the house that had once echoed with Margaret Williams' sharp commands now hummed quietly with care. Precious moved through each day with patience, tending to Margaret's needs, as if the past cruelty had never existed. It wasn't easy. Every task reminded her of the months of suffering, of the nights she had cried alone, of the words that cut deeper than knives. But she remembered the advice of Mrs. Helen. Kindness is powerful. Don't let cruelty turn you into something bitter. Margaret noticed it too. Though pride and stubbornness made her resist admitting it, she hated the way she depended on Precious, hated the way her former victim never spoke a harsh word. Yet, the warmth of care was unfamiliar, disarming, and unsettling. She had ruled with fear for decades, but now she felt powerless and strangely drawn to the woman she had once despised. One evening, Margaret attempted to speak. Her voice was frail, almost foreign to her ears. You didn't have to stay," she said, struggling to sit upright. "You could have left, abandoned me like everyone else would." Precious smiled softly, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "I could have," she said, "but anger and hate don't heal anyone. Even you need care, even after everything." Margaret's eyes watered. Pride clashed with regret, and for the first time, she admitted the truth she had long denied. She had been wrong, bitterly, painfully wrong. Daniel watched quietly from the doorway. He had never seen his mother humbled like this, never seen her silent, thoughtful, and vulnerable. And yet, he also realized how much Precious had grown through it all. The patience, the courage, the love that refused to give up even when the world seemed cruel. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Margaret began to recover. Her body grew stronger, but her heart had changed even more. She no longer shouted at Precious for small mistakes. She no longer criticized her in front of neighbors. She began to speak quietly, sometimes even smiling softly when Precious brought her food or tidied the room. Then, one afternoon, Margaret's hands trembled as she held Precious's. Her voice was choked with emotion, thick with tears. I am sorry," she whispered, "for everything. For the insults, the lies, the pain I caused. Please, forgive me." Precious felt a lump in her throat, her heart aching with relief, compassion, and a trace of the sorrow she had carried for so long. She knelt beside Margaret, taking her hands in both of hers. "I forgive you," she said gently. "We are human. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." Margaret's eyes fell freely now. She had lost her pride, but she had gained something she had never understood before: humility, gratitude, and the realization that cruelty never builds a life, but kindness can rebuild even the most broken hearts. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt heavy. The air carried warmth instead of fear, respect instead of intimidation. Precious and Margaret sat together, a bridge formed by compassion and endurance. Margaret Williams fully recovered as the Harmattan winds gave way to warmer days. She could walk again without support, cook small meals, and sit outside in the evenings, but she was no longer the same woman who once ruled her home with cruelty. Illness had weakened her body, but kindness had changed her soul. The first thing Margaret did when she regained her strength was call Precious into the living room. Her voice trembled, not from sickness, but from emotion. "Sit down, my daughter," she said softly. That single sentence broke something inside Precious. For the first time, she was not called a stranger, a burden, or a mistake. She was called daughter. Margaret stood slowly and did something Precious never imagined. She knelt. Daniel rushed forward in shock, but Margaret raised her hand to stop her. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at Precious. "You hurt me when I should have protected you. I tried to destroy your marriage because I was afraid of losing my son. You repaid my wickedness with love. Please forgive me, not just with words, but with your heart." Precious fell to her knees too, holding the older woman tightly as she cried. Years of pain poured out in that embrace, tears of sadness, relief, and healing. "I forgive you long ago," she whispered. "I stayed because I believed love could change things, and it did." From that day, the house truly became a home. Margaret defended Precious in front of neighbors. When anyone spoke ill of her, she corrected her sharply. "This woman saved my life," she would say, "not with medicine alone, but with kindness." Daniel also changed. He apologized to Precious for his silence and promised to be a better husband. He learned that love does not mean choosing sides blindly, but standing for what is right. Peace returned slowly, but it stayed. Precious sometimes remembered the nights she cried herself to sleep, the moments she almost walked away. She realized that leaving would have been understandable, but staying with kindness had written a better ending. Margaret lived the rest of her days honoring Precious, treating her with respect and affection. The woman who once spread bitterness now shared wisdom, and Precious learned a powerful truth she would carry forever. Kindness is not weakness, forgiveness is not forgetting, and love, when chosen deliberately, can heal even the hardest hearts. Moral lesson: pain can harden us or shape us. Cruelty multiplies when answered with cruelty, but kindness stops the cycle. Sometimes the greatest victory is not revenge, but choosing love when the world expects hate.